forehead. I was just about to oblige. One thing about me, for better or for worse, is that I will basically never back down from a dare. When I felt a slice of cold air from the direction of the foyer and caught sight of a familiar cardinal red pea coat slipping in through the front door. "Hey!" I called a beat too quickly, hopping down off the chair so fast my bad ankle nearly gave out and left me sprawled on the dingy Persian rug. I ignored the goading jeers of my teammates as I threaded my eager way through the crowd. "You came." "I came," Greer agreed with a forbearing smile, tucking her hands into her pockets and popping up onto the toes of her boots, pressing her cold cheek against mine. She wore a pair of round tortoiseshell glasses and an oversized LL Bean pullover, a vintage Tiffany bean around her neck. "I like old things," she'd told me once, the two of us sprawled on my bed back at the Western Massachusetts boarding school we'd attended together. Now, 2 years later, I couldn't help but hope that included boyfriends. "Hi." "Hi yourself," I said, my heart vibrating dorkily in my chest. "I didn't think you were going to show." "I almost didn't," she confessed. "But Bree is already here somewhere, so I figured—" She broke off, eyes narrowing as she looked across the warm, crowded living room, where Dex had graciously taken over in my stead and was already halfway through a 24-ounce can of White Claw. "I thought you said this was going to be like a chill, low-key kind of thing." "Is this not low-key?" I asked sheepishly, my voice getting lost as the rest of the guys erupted into cheers over my shoulder. Most of the upperclassmen on the lacrosse team had moved off campus a few years back, when Harvard randomized their housing selection process and made it harder for teams to self-sort into particular dorms. Since then, the lease on this place had been passed from one lax captain to the next, the walls and floors and carpets bearing the not inconsiderable scars of hundreds of parties way wilder than this one. "Come on," I shouted over the noise, jerking my thumb in the direction of the kitchen. "I'll get you a drink." Greer let me take her hand as we weaved through the crush of bodies in the narrow center hallway, past the once grand front staircase that led up to the bedrooms and the tiny little telephone nook tucked underneath. "That's cute," she said when she noticed it, and she sounded sincere, which I took to mean she hadn't looked closely enough to see the giant erupting cock and balls carved into the woodwork of the antique bench. The kitchen was mercifully empty, the heavy doors swinging shut behind us and muffling the clatter of the party. Greer hopped up onto the scarred Formica counter as I pulled a beer from one of the picnic coolers lined up beside the door to the cluttered mudroom, handing it over before grabbing one for myself and perching against the edge of the wobbly wooden table. "So," I said, reaching out and clinking my can against hers. "What's up?" Greer shook her head, smirking a little at the question. "Not too much," she said, the heels of her boots banging lightly against the worn lower cabinets. The kitchen at the Lax House was huge, with 2 stainless steel fridges parked side by side and a massive industrial range that always looked a little grimy. The sink was a big, old double basin situation with separate taps for hot water and cold. "How about you?" "Oh, you know." I shrugged, the silence stretching out between us for a few seconds too long not to be awkward. I took a big gulp of my beer. I'd forgotten this, how back before Greer and I started dating my junior year at Bartley, I was perpetually tongue-tied around her. How I could never think of the right thing to say. "Not too much, either." Jesus Christ. What was wrong with me? I was generally pretty good with girls, but women? I guess they were technically women now that we were in college, though you'd never have known it by the way my mind was suddenly blanker than an old...